You might be wondering why the thumbnail for this episode is titled, Survive 72 Days Stranded. In this episode we are going to dive into this unbelievable real-life story, and why you can't let anything stop you from succeeding. But here's the question for you. What would you do to survive? Would you go to the extreme, even if it means consuming the flesh of your comrades? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the start of our thrilling audio adventure. Brace yourselves for an unforgettable journey through sound and story. Episode 3. Now playing, on the morning of October 13, 1972, Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 took off from Montevideo, Uruguay, and headed to Santiago, Chile. On board Flight 571, 45 people including 19 teammates from an amateur rugby team and 5 crew members headed to Chile. The hum of the engines, the feeling of liftoff, the anticipation of their destination, all these were shared by the passengers as the plane climbed into the sky. The passengers' excitement was clearly obvious. They all have been looking forward to the trip. "This is it, boys. Our moment of glory awaits," exclaimed Nando Parado, his voice filled with anticipation. Their destination was just a flight away, when suddenly dark clouds rolled in, shrouding the plane around. The turbulence intensified, forcing the aircraft to rapidly descend. Fear gripped the passengers as the pilots battled against the fierce winds and blinding rain, caught the plane in its tumultuous grasp, and off its intended course towards the Andes Mountains. "Hold on tight, everyone, we'll get through this," shouted the captain, his voice strained with effort. The passengers thrown into a state of fear and uncertainty. The plane was swallowed by the clouds as the skies darkened. As the storm intensified, no one on board could predict the chilling adventure that lay ahead in the Andean mountains. With a deafening roar, Flight 571 slammed into a mountainside. Metal groaned, glass shattered, and screams in the air as chaos erupted in the cabin. Of the 45 people aboard the aircraft, 3 passengers and 2 crew members in the rear section of the fuselage died when the tail cone was ripped from the fuselage. 2 more fell off and died, and a further bunch fell to their deaths when the other part of the aircraft slammed into a snowbank. Amidst the wreckage, Nando Parado fought to free himself, his heart pounding with terror. "Stay calm! Stay together!" he shouted, in an effort to keep calm. In the immediate aftermath, a chilling and eerie silence fell. The remaining passengers, dazed and terrified, clung to life amidst the wreckage. They tried to comprehend the enormity of their situation. The cold was relentless. In the silence that followed, they realized they were lost in the wilderness, alone, and their fight to get out had just begun. Days turned into weeks, and the survivors grappled with the harsh realities of life in the Andes. Faced with the daunting task of finding food amidst the ice and snow, they scavenged for anything edible, their desperation growing with each passing day. They had very little food to eat. They found 8 chocolate bars, 3 small jars of jam, a tin of mussels, a tin of almonds, a few dates, some candy, dried plums, and several bottles of wine. They rationed the meager supply of food, but it lasted only a week. When the food ran out, they ate the cotton stuffing from the seats and leather from belts and shoes, which made them sick. Shelter too was a challenge. Their only protection against the biting cold was the wreckage of the plane. They huddled together for warmth. "We have to stay strong," Nando urged, his voice trembling with emotion. "We will make it through this, I promise." They made repeated attempts to signal for help, using whatever materials they could find. They created large SOS signs in the snow, hoping that a passing plane might spot them. Each time a plane flew overhead, their hearts would leap with hope, only to sink again when it passed by, oblivious to their plight. As days turned into weeks, hope began to wane. With no rescue in sight and starvation looming, the survivors faced an unthinkable decision. "We have no choice," murmured one survivor, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We must do what we must to survive." In this dire situation, they were confronted with a choice that would challenge every moral fiber of their being. A choice that under any other circumstance would be unimaginable. They had to consider the unthinkable, to use the bodies of their perished friends as a means to stave off their own impending deaths. Canessa later described the decision to eat the dead. "Our common goal was to survive, but what we lacked was food. We had long since run out of the meager pickings we'd found on the plane, and there was no vegetation or animal life to be found. After just a few days, we had the sensation that our own bodies were consuming themselves just to remain alive. Before long, we would become too weak to recover from starvation. We knew the answer, but the answer was just too terrifying to contemplate. The bodies of our friends and teammates preserved outside in the snow and ice contained the vital, life-preserving proteins that would keep us alive. But could we do it? For a long time we agonized. I went out in the snow and prayed to God for guidance. Without his consent, I felt I would be violating the memory of my friends, that I would be stealing their souls. We wondered whether we were going mad to even contemplate such a deed. Had we turned into brute savages, or was this the only alternative for us to survive? Truly, we were pushing the limits of our fear. This was not a decision taken lightly, but as hunger gnawed at their insides, the survivors faced a grim reality. They would have to resort to cannibalism to stay alive. With trembling hands and heavy hearts, they made the unthinkable decision to consume the flesh of their fallen comrades. "Forgive us," whispered Nando, his voice choked with tears. "We do this out of necessity, not out of malice." It was a somber agreement steeped in grief and necessity, a pact born out of the primal instinct to survive. Every bite was a bitter testament to their will to live, a silent prayer for their fallen friends. Each morning began with the same routine, rationing what little food they had and melting snow for water. They huddled together for warmth, their bodies a stark contrast to the unforgiving ice and snow of the Andes. They shared stories of home, of warm summer days and loved ones waiting. Each word was a lifeline, a tether to the world they once knew. Hope was their currency, and they spent it lavishly, dreaming of the day they would be found. They clung to the belief that their ordeal would end, that they would once again taste freedom. 2 months into their ordeal, 2 men from the crash mustered the courage to trek out of the Andes and find help. In the heart of the wilderness, a duo from the crash, Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, embarked on an arduous journey. Their goal? To find help, to bring an end to the unimaginable ordeal they and their fellow survivors had been enduring. Their spirits were fueled by a shared determination, a glimmer of hope that was hard to extinguish. "We will not give up," vowed Roberto, his voice filled with determination. "We will find help no matter what it takes." They navigated treacherous terrains, climbed steep inclines and descended into deep valleys. They crossed frozen rivers, their bodies screaming in pain against the biting cold. Just when all hope seemed lost, a miracle occurred. A search team spotted both men, their emaciated figures barely visible against the snow-covered landscape. Tears of relief flowed freely as they were airlifted to safety, their ordeal finally at an end. "We are alive," whispered Nando, his voice filled with wonder. "Against all odds, we are alive." On December 20th, 1972, more than 2 months after the crash, the remaining survivors were finally rescued. The rescue operation was a desperate race against time, each passing second a testament to human resilience. The rescuers, a motley crew of brave hearts from the Chilean Andes, swooped down on the desolate landscape. Their faces, etched with strong will, mirrored the survivors' joy and relief. Their spirits unbroken, welcomed the rescuers with smiles that held stories of courage. The journey back to civilization was a surreal one, a stark contrast to the one they had endured. Each survivor, carrying the weight of their experiences, stepped back into a world that had continued to spin on its axis. The warmth of familiar faces, the comfort of home, the taste of a meal not born out of desperation, they were back. With the rescue, their horrific ordeal in the Andes finally came to an end. In the years that followed, the survivors from Flight 571 grappled with their experiences, each finding their own way to heal. The echoes of the Andes still rang in their ears, but the strength that had carried them through remained. They were not the same individuals who had boarded Flight 571. "We survived because we refused to give up," Nando Parado once said, "and as long as there is hope, there is always a chance for survival." The ordeal had sculpted them into figures of survival, figures who understood the profound value of life. "We may have lost much on that mountain," one of them mentioned, "but we gained something too. A newfound appreciation for life and the strength of the human spirit. For the strength they discovered within themselves, and for the bonds that held them together in the face of despair. As one survivor put it, "We did what we had to do to survive. It was not a choice, it was a necessity. We are not heroes, we are survivors." And as our audio adventure draws to an end, we extend our gratitude for your presence. Until next time, may your adventure be as grand as your imagination. Stay curious, my friends.